What's going on, guys? Welcome to my wood shop. I have a project that I've been kicking down the road for like 6 months now, and I figured since I have all of this fancy equipment, cameras and microphones for my golf channel, that I would create a sister channel to that called Iverson Woodworks. One of my buddies at work had one of his pets pass away, which is very unfortunate, but he asked me if I could make an urn for his pet's remains. I said, of course I can. I'm a woodworker. I've been woodworking for about 10 years now. And so I built him an urn. The sad part is he had another pet pass away unexpectedly a few months later, and he asked me if I could make another urn exactly like the first one. And those are right here. So we've got this first urn. Okay, it's got a lid. It's made out of black walnut. Pretty good stuff. And then this urn here is not quite done. I've got the most of it built, but I still need to route the base, and I need to build a lid. And these two urns need to be approximately the same dimensions. So I need to build this lid for this urn. Problem is, I am out of walnut, and I don't want to go into Salt Lake and buy lumber because I don't really need a lot of lumber, and I'm not going to go down there just to buy a little slab of walnut big enough to make that lid. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna cut this in half. This is raw lumber. I'm gonna cut it in half, and then I'm gonna edge glue two pieces together, and I'm gonna make the lid for that other urn. So stay tuned, and I'll show you the most of the process for doing that, but we've got to stop for the glue up, and I don't know when that's gonna happen. So this video will just be me cutting up this 5/6 piece of walnut here. It might be 8/4, I don't know. Yeah, wood measurement's weird, by the way. Let me give you a quick rundown. 4/4, because the fraction 4/4 equals 1. 4/4 is 1 inch. 5/4 would be 1.25 inches, and 8/4 would be 2 inches, because 8/4 equals 2 when you reduce the fraction. There you go. You're all caught up. You guys see that? 4/4, 2 inches, 4/4. 11/9 of Americans don't understand fractions, and now you do. If we take this piece of wood here, this piece of walnut, you can see total thickness is about, let's say, 3/4 of an inch. And 3/4 of an inch times 2 is going to be an inch and a half. So we know we need at least an inch and a half, and we know that this piece of lumber here is almost 2 inches thick. Therefore, after we subtract out the kerf of the blade, which is about 1/8 of an inch thick, we still need to be able to have two pieces that we can glue together that would equal the thickness of that lid. I think that's about what we're trying to do. The first step to making sure that we cut directly through the middle of this piece of wood and don't waste any on either side is to use one of these. It's used to find the center of an object, and it's going to be kind of hard for me to show you how it works, but I will do my damnedest here. There's a spot on here, right here, that a pencil goes in. See that? So your pencil goes in there and then protrudes right here so that it'll mark the wood. Put the contraption on here, and you make sure it's fully twisted in the correct direction. And you draw yourself a line, and that finds the exact center of your piece of wood, for the most part. That pencil mark is the direct center of that piece of wood. So now we know where to set our blade when we cut this in half. But there is some work to do before that. We do need to cut this piece down because we don't need the entire piece split down the middle. We only need enough to make that lid. Okay, so here we have the lid. We can see this lid is 6 inches across. And if we measure in this direction, we can see that it's about 9 inches wide. So rather than go exactly 8 and 13/16 wide, what we're gonna do is just say that it's 9 inches. When you guys are woodworking, you've always gotta leave room for the kerf of the blade or the thickness of the blade, because no saw blade is 0 thickness. But what'll happen is if you don't engineer that number into your measurements, there's sometimes when you'll find yourself 1/8 of an inch short because you did not plan for the kerf of the saw blade. Now that we know we need a 9-inch wide piece of walnut here, we're gonna measure, let's give ourselves a little extra right there. And then you take your square it up, You can use whatever you want. You can use one of these. Another common one is one of these, right? Pretty common square. And then what you'll do is you'll line your mark up, and because the square sits exactly at a 90-degree angle, all you've got to do is move it over to the mark you made and bang it like that. And then you've got your mark, which I don't know how well is appearing in the camera, but there's your mark. And now we know where to cut. All right, guys, so I'm about to make my first cut of the video. Please use protection. I'm not talking about that protection. I'm talking about make sure that you're protecting your lungs and your respiratory system. Make sure you're protecting your eyes. And I have some earplugs here that I'm gonna put in. Don't even mess around with it. It's not worth it. Do you guys see that pencil mark there? This particular brand of miter saw casts a shadow where the blade is. I'm not going to turn it on, but if you look, you can see the shadow of the blade. See it? And remember, this blade is 1/8 of an inch thick, and you've always got to factor that in or you're going to come up short on your cuts. Pretty rookie move. It's like double chipping in golf. It's a rookie move. We don't want to do it. Measure twice, cut once. And if you're in doubt, have that blade over on the opposite side of the pencil mark, and you'll rarely ever waste any lumber. All right, guys, now we've got the piece of lumber that we need here to make that lid. We've just got to split it down the middle, and then we'll do what's called an edge gluing. We'll glue the two pieces together. We'll make sure they're nice and straight, and that's what we'll do to make our lid. It's the hard way, but I'd rather not drive to Salt Lake City and buy lumber, that much lumber. I don't want to do it, so I'm not going to. Okay, the next step is to line our fence up. That's what this contraption's called. Our next step is to line this fence up so that this blade cuts almost exactly through the middle of this piece of wood, thereby wasting the least amount of wood possible and giving us the greatest chance of being successful with this project. And if somebody is uttering right now to this video, why don't you just go to Home Depot and buy some walnut? Don't ever do that. Do not buy lumber from a big box store. Find your nearest lumber yard. Do that. Don't make it weird. Alrighty, I'm gonna start my dust collection system. We're gonna run this through upside down, inside out, and we're gonna cut through it. Gotta make sure the blade's gotta go up at least half of the height of the object. And you're gonna watch me do this several times because you would not make this cut all at one time. It's too much for the blade, so you need to do it in little bits at a time. And you're always gonna rotate the wood this way. You're never going to rotate it this way because the blade is not exactly in the middle. If you rotate it this way, your cuts may not line up. So you're always going to rotate this way. All right, let's do it. I'm positive there's somebody watching this video right now that's saying there's a better way to cross-cut a piece of wood like that. To which I say, there's a lot of better ways to do it. There's worse ways to do it. And that's the cool thing about woodworking, is that if you have all the cool machines, you can cut a piece of wood any way you want. You can do whatever you want. As long as you do it safely, I don't care how you do it. Let's take a look at another way that we could have cut that piece of wood in half. Some might argue it's better. Everything's up for debate. Let's take a look at doing this with a bandsaw. This is a bandsaw. It's quite a large one. Some people are not going to have this in their wood shop, but what you can do with a bandsaw is you can set the fence up that the bandsaw should have come with if it's from a reputable manufacturer, and you can raise it up, and you can use this fancy nifty little guy here to cut your piece of wood in half. I don't really give a damn how you do it. All I know is I need this lid for this urn done. That's all I know. It's up to you or me as the woodworker to figure out how to do that and what machine is going to do it the best, safest, or in some cases the most entertaining way possible. Because after you've been doing this for a while, sometimes it can get to be boring and/or / monotonous. Just do it whatever way you can do it safely. Don't lose those fingers. You need them to play golf. So the next thing I need to do is I need to make sure these edges are good to go. And you can see they're not. They're rough sawn from the mill. If you're gonna glue these two pieces of wood together edge to edge like this, you need to have a nice square flat area. You could do this if you wanted to, but the joint's not going to be very strong and you'd have to use a lot of wood filler. It's basically a rookie move and you'd never want to do it. It's not bad. You could do that if you wanted to, but don't unless you're a huge rookie. So what we're going to do is trim both of these sides nice and square, and then we're going to see what way we've got to glue this up so that the grain matches, so that you can't tell this is two different pieces of wood unless you're really paying attention. And I'll go over that when the time comes, but that's what we're going to do now. Guys, here's another free tip for you. When you're using your table saw, you want to make sure the blade's only up as far as it needs to be to make the cut. I hate saying it, the reason for that is because if you do get cut on this blade, there's only a little bit of it sticking up and you might get to keep most of your finger. If you made this cut like this and slipped your thumb through on accident, that blade's up way higher than my thumb is thick. You're losing that whole thumb. So lower the blade down enough to make the cut, maybe with 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, this thing needs some WD-40. But you would ideally have just high enough for the gullet of these teeth to be above the cut. I don't even do that, guys. I'm saying if you got enough to make the cut, you're just fine. Don't do it any other way. Don't make it weird. Just enough to make the cut. See that? Just enough to make the cut, and you just might get to keep most of your finger if you're lucky. Trust me, this saw cut me last year. And now that all that nonsense is out of the way, and you know that you get to keep most of your finger if you do some of the things I tell you, I'm gonna run this through a couple of times and make sure we're nice and square, and then we'll be able to do our glue up, which is, you'll see, it's a bit of a shenanigan. It's almost like you'd be better off if you had 3 or 4 arms, but we'll get to that. The next step in this process is matching up your grain. A good woodworker, you don't need to be a great woodworker, a good woodworker will manipulate these two pieces of wood around until they see which direction they need to make it so that the grain lines up and it doesn't look like they glued two pieces of wood together. Of course, if you look at the end grain once it's glued up, you're going to be able to tell very easily that this is two separate pieces of wood because of the rings in the wood. What I want to do is arrange these two pieces of wood so that it doesn't look too much like I did anything, and from what I can see, I don't like that. I like this. This walnut's gonna be stained a dark stain color anyway, but I like this. There's a high likelihood that the untrained eye is gonna have no idea this is two pieces of wood glued together. And that's the fun about woodworking. You start out just making stuff functional, and then you get to the point where you're eventually making stuff that, I don't wanna say fools people or tricks them, but you can do what you want and they don't necessarily know how you did it. Once you've found how you wanna line these up, make sure you mark them. Make it easy. Piece 1, piece 2, whatever you wanna do. I usually make some scribble marks across, and then even if these pieces of wood are completely mixed up, you can still always come back together. You can see the 3 scribble marks I put in there. It might be hard. You line those scribble marks up, and it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together. You know exactly the orientation in which these two things should be glued together. All right, guys, here's another pro tip for you. Wood glue, okay? I use Titebond 2. You can use whatever you want, but Titebond 2 typically gets the job done, and it does it really well. You can see here that we've got some regular old yellow glue made from the hooves of horses. Just kidding, I don't know if that's actually true. And then you've got some that's had a little bit of dye added to it. You can see that it's brown. Since we're working with dark colored wood, I want to use wood glue that matches said wood. We want this to look as professional as possible. We don't want to mess around with the glue joint being too visible. So just use brown glue if you're using brown wood, and you can use regular old glue if you're using oak or cherry or whatever. Let's talk about a few tools we're going to be using here. Got these little K clamps or F clamps or whatever they're called. You're gonna need a few of these. Get it? They look like a little F or a K or whatever. If you don't like spreading glue with your finger, you can get it. These are called acid brushes. They're single use for the most part. You can get a pack of these acid brushes off of Amazon for nothing. The next things I'm going to use to make sure this wood is very flat are these. They're called cauls, C-A-U-L. And all it is some wood that I've put some packing tape on because the glue won't stick to packing tape. And then you got these big bubbas, these big old cabinet clamps. You don't have to use these if you don't want to. They're expensive, but they do provide really good even clamping force. You can never have too many clamps as a woodworker. Even if you're getting the Harbor Freight ones, there's a bunch of Harbor Freight clamps over here off camera. You can't have too many clamps. I'm sure someone is screaming at this video right now saying, for God's sake, man, clean up your workbench. No, I'm not gonna clean up my workbench. I like it like this. Here's some mahogany. I might clean it up a little. I'll put this clamp away. It's like when somebody's desk is too clean at work. You're like, do you actually do anything here? All joking aside though, I'm not gonna clean up my work area. Get over it. I'm gonna take this cabinet clamp and I'm gonna open it up. And I'm gonna take this other cabinet clamp and I'm gonna do the same thing. We're gonna open it up. Set up your cabinet clamps about as far away as the wood is wide. Except we do need room to get those cauls on there, which I'll show you is a big pain in the katukas. That's how that works. But there's still some stuff to do before you tighten the clamps. You know how to line the pieces of wood up because you've marked them somehow. And then what you do is you set your two pieces of wood upright, and then you're gonna grab your glue. Use a very liberal amount of glue here. You're gonna slap this glue on here just like that. And you can't use too much glue, but you really want this glue joint to be nice and strong. So one way of doing this is to use your finger. It's not gonna hurt anything. And spread this glue on here. Look, oh, isn't that nice? Wow, everybody's having a good time. There you go, that glue's good to go. If you don't like touching glue, that's fine. I've been in contact with many, many gallons of glue over the years. It's not gonna do anything to you. You wipe it on one of these random rags sitting around. You can take this acid brush and do this, like a sissy. I'm just kidding, to each their own. See, spread it around. How nice is that? There we go, wow. That's sweet. Good job. Good job, acid brush. You can go to your other piece since you've already ruined an acid brush and do that one too. Make sure it's all spread around nice. And this glue doesn't set up that quick, but you still gotta kinda be minding your P's and Q's and don't let the glue dry. So make sure your stuff's set up first. And then you're gonna flip these two pieces down. And you're gonna glue up the edges that you marked. Push them together a little bit. You're gonna see this glue start to squirt out, see? And it's doing that on the bottom too. So it's probably going to get on your workbench, but that's okay. This glue cleans up with water. This messes a place. You're all good to go there. You got some glue squeeze out. You can move your clamps up a little bit here, but you've got to leave enough room on each side for your caul. You could also put your caul here, right in the middle. I'm going to put the cauls on the outside like this. Right, and that'll make sure that piece of wood glues up nice and straight, because these are nice and straight. This part can be a little tricky. It requires a bit of finesse. Get your clamp here, get it on the caul. This is why it may help to have a buddy, maybe your spouse or somebody help you out if you've got a kid available, a child, not a goat. And tighten this up. It doesn't need to be perfect. You don't want to tighten it too much yet. It's a lot easier after you've got one on, but don't get too excited. You still got to do the other side. It's looking like a bit of a crap show here, but this is all going to come together in the end. You got your other caul over here, your set of cauls over here, and you're going to lift the workpiece up. And you're going to sit here wishing you had a spare set of hands. But I've been doing this for a long time, so I'm a little bit better at it than you probably are. And we'll get our other one over here. And you're not tightening these down very much right now, guys, because you still got to put the main clamp load on, which is going to be these cabinet clamps. So now we're going to start tightening the cabinet clamps. And you don't need to be down on the cabinet clamps for them to do their job. These clamps here are suspending the workpiece up a little bit. That doesn't matter. Just want to make sure they're snug. And then you're going to start tightening your cabinet clamps. You guys, contrary to popular belief, you don't need a ton of clamping pressure to glue two pieces of wood together. So then you're going to tighten these a little bit on your caul. Make sure your glue's closed. And then you're going to tighten these a little bit more, the cabinet clamps a little bit more. And you'll start to feel when they don't want to tighten anymore. Tighten up your cauls. Tighten up your cabinet clamps again. And now what you've done is you've ensured that these two pieces of wood are securely glued together, see? But you can see these two pieces of wood are being firmly pressed together, and the cauls are making sure that the piece will be flat. Flatness is what we want. It's the sign of a professional. It's the sign that you know what you're doing and that you're not jacking around. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 clamps involved here just to glue two pieces of wood together. After you've let this dry overnight, go do something else, go play some golf. We'll run it through the planer and we'll make a solid piece of wood. It'll be fun. We'll have a good time. We're gonna run it through the DeWalt planer over here tomorrow or whenever I get around to it, and it'll be really nice and flat. All right, everybody, that was the basics of how to mill up some raw lumber and get it to where it could be edge glued together into one piece of wood. You can see woodworking takes a lot of tools. The lumber can be expensive depending on where you source it. And that's the last point I want to make in this video, and I will say it from time to time depending on how much content I put on this channel. Make sure you're pricing your projects correctly. This is your time you're using, your electricity, the tools that you worked hard to buy. Make sure you're not lowballing yourself. You're shopping around and you're making sure you're giving your customer a good number where they feel comfortable, and you're also getting the money that's going to cover your materials and your labor and everything else you need. Okay, if you run a business and you've got employees, you need to be pricing your projects so that you're making the correct amount of money to make all of the gears turn and making sure that you're generating enough profit to make it worth your while. If the customer doesn't like your pricing, then tell them to go pound sand. If you are not making the money you need to make, you're just gonna start to get sour and you're gonna start to get resentful, and it's gonna make it so woodworking is not fun for you. Price your projects correctly. As always, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next video here at Iverson Woodworks on YouTube, if there is indeed a next video. You guys have a good one.